The first time Paula called my report embarrassing, I thought she was joking. The meeting room went quiet, in that strange way corporate meeting rooms do when someone says something cruel in a calm voice, and everyone suddenly becomes very interested in their laptop screen. Paula sat at the head of the conference table, flipping through the printed pages of my report like she was searching for evidence of a crime. Then she dropped the pages on the table and looked around the room. "Well," she said casually, "this is embarrassing." A few people glanced at me. Most looked down. One person adjusted their glasses. Another started typing, even though nobody had asked them anything. I sat there trying to understand what had just happened, because the thing was, the report she was criticizing was the exact report she had approved 2 days earlier. I had only been at Henderson and Cole Financial for 3 months. It was my first real job after graduate school, and when I got the offer, I felt like I had won something. The company handled large investment portfolios for corporations and pension funds, which meant every team lived and died by numbers. Data was everything. Performance analysis, risk exposure, client reporting, forecasting. If the numbers were wrong, people noticed. My job sounded simple on paper. Analyze large financial data sets, build weekly performance reports, send them to Paula for approval, wait for them to go to senior leadership. Until that meeting, I thought I was doing well. The Monday team meeting was standard. 6 analysts around the table, projector on, coffee cooling in paper cups, that stale conference room air that always smelled faintly like dry erase marker and stress. Paula stood near the screen, one hand resting on the back of her chair. The title slide of my report glowed behind her. She tapped the printed packet with a pen. "Daniel," she said, her voice perfectly calm, "can you explain why you structured the risk analysis section like this?" I blinked. "Because it reflects the volatility trends from the last quarter," I said. Paula tilted her head. "But it doesn't align with the format we normally use." I hesitated, because that format was the format she had specifically asked me to use. "I thought you wanted the risk analysis separated by asset class," I said carefully. She smiled. It was not a warm smile. "No," she said. "That would be the logical way to do it." A few people shifted in their seats. Not much, just enough for me to notice. That was the moment I understood something was off. Not just that she was criticizing me. The way she was doing it. The way she turned a choice she had approved into proof that I was incompetent. She flipped another page. "In this chart," she said, pointing to the volatility graph, "what exactly is this supposed to show?" "It shows the quarterly volatility trend for the infrastructure portfolio," I said. Paula looked around the room. "Does anyone understand what Daniel is trying to show here?" Silence. Not confused silence. Cowardly silence. Everyone understood the chart. No one wanted to be the person who corrected Paula in public. She sighed like a disappointed teacher. "This is the problem with rushing analysis," she said. Then she turned back to me. "You're clearly intelligent, Daniel, but work like this makes the whole department look bad. Embarrassing." That was the word she used. The meeting moved on after that. No one mentioned my report again. There was no pile-on, no debate, no direct attack, just that one carefully placed humiliation, delivered in front of the whole team, then folded neatly into the meeting like it had never happened. That bothered me more than if she had yelled. Afterward, Josh caught up with me near the coffee machine. Josh had been at Henderson and Cole for almost 5 years. He was the kind of guy who seemed to know everything about the office, and almost none of it surprised him anymore. He leaned against the counter and lowered his voice. "Don't take it personally," he said. I frowned. What do you mean? He shrugged. That's just Paula. I poured coffee into a paper cup and watched the dark stream rise. What does that even mean? I asked. Josh glanced down the hallway before answering. She likes to keep somebody nervous. I looked at him. You're serious? He gave the kind of shrug people give when they've decided survival matters more than fairness. Every manager has their style. I went back to my desk and pulled up the email thread for the report. There it was. 2 days earlier. Her exact response. Looks good. Use this format going forward. I read it twice, then a third time, because once embarrassment fades, something colder takes its place. Pattern recognition. That was when I noticed something else. In the meeting, Paula had not challenged my data. Not once. She didn't question the conclusions, didn't ask about the numbers, didn't push on the actual analysis. She only attacked the safest possible things. Format, wording, structure, anything she could criticize without having to prove she understood the content. At the time, I told myself it might not mean anything. Some managers cared more about presentation than substance. That was annoying, but not unusual. Then 2 weeks later, it happened again. Same room, same screen, same controlled tone. Paula projected my latest report and folded her arms. Then she shook her head slowly. I don't understand how you managed to make this more confusing than the last one. I felt that knot in my stomach tighten again. Because the report looked completely normal. She pointed to a graph. This section is unnecessary, she said. The section she was pointing to was something she had specifically requested the week before. And this time, I noticed something even stranger. Everything she was criticizing had already been explained clearly. On the next slide, a slide she skipped. She clicked past it too quickly, almost like she didn't want to stop anywhere that might require actual reading. Then, she moved to the conclusion. And this summary, she said, tapping the screen, doesn't really tell us anything. That was when Marcus spoke. Marcus was one of the senior analysts. Mid-40s, sharp, calm, impossible to rattle. He rarely wasted words, which meant people listened when he did speak. It actually explains the variance pretty clearly, he said. The room froze, because Marcus had just done the one thing nobody ever did. He had contradicted Paula. She turned toward him slowly. Oh? Marcus nodded once. Yes. The variance is tied to the infrastructure portfolio. It's in the summary. Paula looked back at the slide. Then she let out a small laugh. Well, if someone has to explain it, then clearly it isn't clear enough. Marcus leaned back. He didn't argue. He didn't need to. The point had already landed. And in that moment, something clicked into place for me. It wasn't just that Paula criticized my reports. It was how she did it. She never pushed on anything that required technical understanding. Only the parts easiest to question from a distance. Anything surface level. Anything theatrical. Later that evening, I sat alone at my desk, staring at the report. The office had emptied out. The lights in the neighboring buildings reflected on the harbor, and the whole floor had that after-hours stillness that makes every mouse click sound louder. And a thought crossed my mind. What if Paula wasn't criticizing my work because she didn't like it? What if she simply wasn't reading it? At first, the idea sounded ridiculous. She was the department manager. Reviewing these reports was part of her job. But the more I thought about the meetings, the emails, the patterns, the more that explanation made sense. The next morning, I got in early. The office was quiet. Pale light spilled through the tall windows overlooking downtown Boston. I opened the report, read through it once, and then added a single sentence to the end of one paragraph. A strange sentence. Something that did not belong in a financial report. Not obscene, not reckless, just obviously wrong in tone if anyone actually read the page. Then I sent the updated version to Paula for approval and waited. 3 hours later, her reply landed in my inbox. Looks good. Send it to the team. I leaned back slowly because the sentence was still there, exactly where I had put it. And if Paula had read the report even once, really read it, she would have caught it immediately. I stared at her email for a long moment. That was the first time I felt something close to anger. Not loud anger. Not dramatic anger. The quieter kind. The kind that shows up when you realize someone has been making you doubt yourself while putting in almost no effort at all. She wasn't reviewing my work. She was performing authority. And once I saw that, I started seeing it everywhere. Paula always asked for reports on Sunday night and approved them Monday morning. Her replies were always short. Looks good. Approved. Send it out. Never a technical question. Never a note about the numbers. Never anything that proved she had actually engaged with the analysis. Monday meetings were the same. She skimmed. She criticized. She performed expertise. And everyone else sat there and played their role. Then the situation got worse. A few weeks later, instead of projecting my report during the team meeting, Paula connected her own laptop to the screen. The title slide came up. At first, I barely noticed it. Then, my eyes dropped to the author line at the bottom. It no longer said my name. It said, Paula Henderson. For a second, I thought maybe I had opened the wrong file in my head. Maybe there were 2 versions. But then she started presenting. Last week, I analyzed the volatility exposure in our infrastructure portfolio, she said confidently. I felt something hard and hot rise in my chest. Not embarrassment this time. Not confusion. Something cleaner than that. Because every chart she clicked through was mine. Every conclusion was mine. Every line of analysis was mine. And she stood there, speaking in that measured, polished voice like she had built the entire thing herself. Nobody said anything. Of course they didn't. Josh glanced at me once and gave me a tiny shrug. That tired office shrug that meant, yes, I see it. No, I'm not going to die on this hill. When the meeting ended, Paula closed her laptop and looked around the room. Any questions? No one spoke. Good, she said, and walked out. The room stayed quiet for a second after she left. Then Marcus said, very calmly, well, that's new. Josh laughed under his breath. Not really. I gathered my notebook slowly. So this just happens? I asked. Josh shrugged. Managers present teamwork all the time. Marcus shook his head. There's a difference between presenting teamwork and changing the author line. That sentence stayed with me the rest of the day. Because that was the insult at the center of everything. Paula wasn't just undermining my work in public. She was lowering me publicly and using me privately. That evening, I stayed late again. Most of the floor was empty. A cleaning cart rolled somewhere in the distance. Outside, city lights shimmered across the dark water. I opened the next report template and started building. As I worked, a thought began to take shape. Not revenge, not exactly. An experiment. Because if Paula truly wasn't reading these reports, then she had no idea what was inside them. And if she had no idea what was inside them, then sooner or later she would present something she could not explain. Something that would force the room to realize the truth. I stared at the empty slide deck for a long time. Then I smiled. Not because I had a plan yet, because I finally understood the weakness in hers. The next morning, I tested the theory again. This time, I added another strange sentence. Not hidden, not buried. Sitting clearly in the middle of the page between two charts. A sentence no attentive reader could miss. Then I sent the report to Paula. 20 minutes later, her reply came back. Looks good. Presented Monday. I leaned back and I stared at the screen. That was it. No more doubt. No more benefit of the doubt. No more pretending maybe she was just busy. Paula wasn't reading the reports at all. And suddenly, the small experiment I had in mind didn't feel hypothetical anymore. It felt inevitable. After that, I started watching everything more carefully. The office patterns, the reporting chain, the way Paula moved in meetings, the way people reacted to her. And the more I watched, the clearer the structure became. Paula's authority depended on distance. Distance from the actual work. Distance from accountability. Distance from anyone willing to say, out loud, that she didn't know what she was talking about. A few days later, Marcus proved I wasn't imagining any of it. It was a Thursday afternoon. Most of the team had already left. Marcus and I were the only two analysts still working in our section. He walked past my desk, glanced at my screen, and paused. You heading out soon? He asked. Another hour, probably. He nodded toward my monitor. You working on the pension volatility report? Yeah. He studied the chart for a second. Then he said, You know Paula's presenting that next week to the executive committee, right? I looked up. What? He nodded, casually. Yeah, it's on her calendar. For a second, I just stared at him. The report I'm writing? Most likely. But she hasn't even looked at it yet. Marcus laughed quietly. That's never stopped her before. Then he walked away, and I sat there for a long time, staring at the numbers on my screen, because suddenly the whole thing snapped into focus. The meeting performances, the superficial criticisms, the author line changes. It wasn't random. It was a system. She tore the work down in front of the people who made it, then presented it upward as proof of her own value. That night, I stayed in the office long after almost everyone was gone. The building was quiet, except for the soft hum of the air system and the distant rumble of traffic far below. I opened the volatility report again and read it from start to finish. The analysis was solid. Infrastructure investments had shown increased sensitivity to interest rate fluctuations over the past quarter. It wasn't flashy work, but it mattered, which meant executives would pay attention. And that was when the idea finally locked into place. If Paula was going to present this to the executive committee, she would have to do more than perform confidence. She would have to explain it, answer questions, defend the model. And if she had not actually read it, that would become a problem very quickly. I leaned back in my chair. The idea felt dangerous, but it also felt fair in a way I hadn't expected. I wasn't going to sabotage the report. I wasn't going to make anything false. I was going to make it real enough that only the person who had actually built it could explain it properly. So the next morning, I came in early and made a few changes. Not big ones, just one meaningful adjustment in the middle of the analysis. A chart comparing volatility projections across 3 infrastructure portfolios. The visual looked normal, clean, professional, but the methodology beneath it was a little more sophisticated. Instead of using the standard variance model by itself, I added a second calculation layer, a statistical adjustment that accounted for policy-driven rate sensitivity affecting municipal bond markets. Everything was accurate. Everything was defensible. But explaining it required knowing exactly how the analysis had been built, which Paula did not. By the time the rest of the team arrived, the report looked like any other report. No red flags, No obvious trap. Just charts, notes, conclusions, methodology. At 9:15, I sent it to Paula. Subject line: Infrastructure Volatility Analysis. Week 14. 22 minutes later, she replied, "Looks good. Let's discuss Monday." I opened the report again and scrolled to the adjusted model. Still there, still untouched, still unread. Later that afternoon, Marcus stopped by my desk. "You finished the volatility report?" "Yeah." He glanced at the screen. "Paula already approve it?" I nodded. Marcus smiled a little. Of course she did. I hesitated, then asked a question directly. "Does she ever read them?" Marcus let out a quiet laugh. "Daniel," he said, "I've been here 9 years." He leaned against my desk. "And I've never seen Paula ask a single technical question about a report she supposedly wrote." That was all I needed. The following Monday, Paula walked into the conference room carrying a slim folder and her laptop. She looked especially confident that morning, which made sense. She thought she had a polished report lined up for the executive committee later that week. The team meeting followed the usual pattern. She criticized a few formatting choices, made a vague remark about clarity, suggested one heading might need tightening, but she never opened the section I had adjusted. Not once. After the meeting, she passed my desk and stopped. "Daniel." I looked up. "That volatility report you prepared," she said. "Good work." I nodded. "Thank you." She gave a small smile. "I'll be presenting it to the executive committee next Thursday." There it was. Confirmation. "Let me know if you want me to walk you through anything before the meeting," I said. Paula waved one hand dismissively. "I'm sure I'll manage." Then she walked away. I watched her go and felt something I had not felt once since joining the company. Calm, real calm, because now everything was set. The analysis was correct. The chart was waiting quietly in the middle of the report. And at some point in that executive conference room, someone was going to ask a question Paula could not answer. Not because the work was wrong, because she had never bothered to understand it. The week leading up to the presentation felt strangely normal. That was the unsettling part. For me, the tension kept building quietly in the background. For Paula, it seemed like any other week. Tuesday morning, she ran the usual team meeting and connected her laptop to the projector. The volatility report came up on the screen. My report. Only now the title slide said, "Prepared by Paula Henderson." No one reacted. No one ever did. But something else caught my attention immediately. She had only changed the first slide. That was it. The rest of the presentation was exactly as I had built it. Every chart, every paragraph, every footnote, even the adjusted volatility model section, which meant she hadn't reviewed the deck. She had changed the name and assumed the rest would carry her. She clicked through the first few slides, repeating the same talking points from my notes. Calm voice, confident posture, polished delivery. If you didn't know better, you would think she understood every word. Then she skipped the adjusted model slide. Not carefully, not strategically. She just clicked past it too fast, as though she didn't even register it. Marcus noticed too. I saw him glance at me for half a second. Neither of us said anything. After the meeting, Paula gathered her laptop. "The executive committee presentation is Thursday morning," she said. Then she looked directly at me. "Daniel, send me the final version of the infrastructure report today." No problem. That afternoon, I opened the report one last time. Not to edit it, just to read it carefully. Every number was right. Every conclusion held. The methodology paragraph under the chart was still precise and clean. Nothing fake. Nothing misleading. Just enough depth that anyone presenting it responsibly would need to understand it. At 4:17 p.m., I sent the final version. Subject line: Infrastructure Volatility Report Final. 10 minutes later, Paula replied, "Perfect. Thanks. That was it. No notes. No questions. No revisions." Wednesday passed quietly. Most people on the floor didn't even know there was an executive committee meeting scheduled for Thursday. Those meetings happened 2 floors above us, behind glass walls and heavy wooden doors, in rooms most analysts never entered. Thursday morning, Marcus stopped by my desk just after 8. "You ready for the show?" he asked. I looked up. "What show?" He smiled faintly. "The meeting." I shrugged. "I'm not even in it." Marcus leaned one shoulder against the cubicle wall. "You might not need to be." At 9:45, Paula left the analyst floor, carrying her laptop and presentation folder. She walked past us without saying a word, straight-backed, focused, certain. At 10, her presentation began upstairs, and the whole floor felt subtly different. Not silent, just aware. People kept working. Emails, spreadsheets, phone calls. But under all of it was the same quiet thought. Paula is upstairs right now. Marcus checked his watch. 10 minutes in, he said. Josh looked over. "You think it's happening?" Marcus smiled. "Depends. On what? Whether somebody asks the right question." Another 10 minutes passed. Nothing. The office carried on. Phones rang. A printer spat out pages. Someone laughed near the break room. Then Marcus's phone buzzed. He looked at the screen. His eyebrows lifted slightly. Josh noticed immediately. "What?" Marcus read it again before answering. Then he turned the phone toward me. The message was from someone in the executive assistant team. 3 words. Meeting paused. Strange. Josh leaned closer. "What does that mean?" Marcus shrugged, but he looked interested now. Could mean anything. 5 minutes later, another message came in. Marcus read it silently. Then he looked at me. "You might want to see this." He handed me the phone. Executive committee asking detailed questions about volatility model. Paula struggling to explain it. Josh exhaled through his nose. Oh, I felt something shift in my chest. Not excitement, not triumph. More like the feeling you get when a falling object finally hits the ground after you've been watching it descend in slow motion. A third message arrived 2 minutes later. Marcus read it and gave one short laugh. "What now?" Josh asked. Marcus turned the phone around. Marcus read, asking Paula to explain why volatility model includes secondary regression layer. She can't explain methodology. Josh stared at the screen. She didn't read it. Marcus nodded once. No, she didn't. Across the office, work continued. But for those few of us who knew, something had already changed. Because somewhere upstairs, Paula was sitting at a polished conference table surrounded by senior executives. And someone had just asked her a question she could not answer about a report she claimed as her own. The worst part for her was not that she looked unprepared. It was what that unpreparedness revealed. Because once the room understood, she didn't know how the report worked. The next question became unavoidable. Who actually wrote it? At 10:37, the elevator doors opened on our floor. Everyone noticed, because Paula stepped out, and she did not look the way she had looked 45 minutes earlier. Normally, she moved through the office like she owned the building. Now her shoulders were tight. Her jaw was set. Her face had that rigid, controlled expression people wear when they're trying very hard not to show that something has gone wrong. She walked straight down the hallway and into her office. The door shut behind her. The analyst section went quiet. Marcus looked up from his laptop. "Well," he said softly, "that was faster than expected." Josh leaned back in his chair. "Did the meeting end early?" Marcus checked his phone again. Another message had arrived. He read it, then looked at me. It didn't end, he said. They ended her presentation. Josh blinked. What does that even mean? Marcus turned the phone around. Executive committee asking for report author to join meeting. The room went still because everybody understood that sentence. At that exact moment, my email notification chimed. I opened it. Sender: Marcus Reed, Executive Committee. Subject: Volatility Report. Clarification: Daniel, please come to Executive Conference Room A. We have a few questions about the infrastructure volatility model in your report. Marcus Reed. Josh laughed softly, half in disbelief. Oh, wow. I stood up slowly, not because I was afraid, because for a second I had to let the reality of it settle. 3 months earlier, I had been a new analyst, trying not to embarrass myself in Monday meetings. Now the executive committee was asking me to explain a report my manager had just presented under her own name. Marcus nodded toward the elevator. Better not keep them waiting. The write-up took less than a minute, but it felt longer. Not because I was nervous, because I knew exactly what had happened upstairs. Paula had walked into that room expecting to perform confidence. Someone had asked a real question, and confidence had stopped being enough. The executive floor was quieter than ours. Cleaner, too. Softer carpet, glass walls. The kind of hush that makes every step sound deliberate. Executive conference room. A sat at the end of the hallway. I knocked once and stepped inside. 8 people sat around the table. Senior partners, department heads. Marcus Reed near the far end, and Paula near the center. Laptop open. The volatility presentation still frozen on the screen behind her. But Paula was not speaking now. She was staring at the table. Marcus looked up when I entered. Daniel, thank you for coming. I nodded. Of course. He gestured toward the screen. We're discussing the infrastructure volatility report that was presented earlier. I glanced briefly at Paula. She still did not look at me. Marcus continued. There's a section in the analysis that includes a secondary regression layer applied to the volatility model. He pointed to the chart. This one. Then he folded his hands. Could you explain how that model works? The room went quiet, not hostile, just attentive. I stepped closer to the screen. The chart looked exactly the way I had built it. 3 volatility curves, 1 adjusted regression line, clean labels, clear logic. It's a secondary regression adjustment applied after the initial variance calculation, I said. A few executives nodded. The first model measures volatility exposure across the infrastructure funds using standard quarterly deviation. I pointed to the adjusted line. The second layer isolates policy-driven rate sensitivity that appeared in the municipal bond market during the last quarter. That's why the volatility spike shows up earlier in the projection. One of the executives leaned forward. So, the adjusted line separates interest rate pressure from the broader infrastructure trend? Yes, I said. That gives a cleaner view of the exposure change. Another executive nodded. That makes sense. Marcus turned slightly toward Paula. Paula, when we asked about this earlier, you said you weren't familiar with the adjustment. Paula finally lifted her head. Her expression was tight. I misunderstood the question, she said. No one reacted. No one challenged her directly. But the silence that followed said more than any accusation could have. Marcus looked back at me. Daniel, did you develop this model? Yes. And did you prepare the full report? Yes. Marcus nodded slowly. Well, he said, looking around the table, that explains the confusion. No one raised their voice. No one made a scene. That was the brutal part. No theatrics, no shouting, just a room full of senior people arriving at the same conclusion at exactly the same time. Paula had presented a report she did not write. Worse, she had not even understood it well enough to survive one serious question. One of the senior partners spoke next. "Daniel," he said, "this is excellent work." "Thank you." He nodded once. "Very strong analysis." Marcus closed his laptop. "I think that answers our questions," he said. Then, after a beat, he added, "We'll review the reporting process later." That was the closest anyone came to saying it out loud. The meeting ended shortly after that. As I was leaving, I heard one executive say quietly behind me, "He's the analyst who prepared it?" Marcus answered, "He's been here 3 months." There was a pause. Then the executive said, "Good hire." That line stayed with me. Back on the analyst floor, everybody looked up when I returned. Josh stood almost immediately. "Well?" Marcus raised an eyebrow from across the room. "What happened?" I sat down at my desk and opened my laptop. They wanted clarification on the model. Josh laughed. "That's it?" Marcus smiled slightly. "That's enough." The rest of the day passed in an odd kind of quiet. Paula stayed in her office with the door shut. Nobody went in. Nobody was invited. 2 days later, an email hit everyone's inbox. Subject: Department Structure Update. Effective immediately, Paula Henderson will be transitioning to a strategic advisory role within the firm. During this transition period, reporting responsibilities for the analytics team will be temporarily overseen by Marcus Reed. Josh read the email twice. Then he looked at me. "Strategic advisory role," he said. "That is some very corporate wording." Marcus barely looked up. "It means she's not managing anyone anymore." I stared at the email longer than I expected to, because despite everything that had happened, I did not feel triumphant. Not exactly. Paula had not been dragged out. She had not been publicly destroyed. The company had done what companies do. They had moved the problem sideways, given it a cleaner title, and hoped the lesson would stay quiet. Later that afternoon, Marcus stopped by my desk. "You handled that well upstairs," he said. "Thanks." He nodded toward the report on my screen. "Working on the next one?" "Yeah." Marcus smiled. "Good." Then he walked away, and that should have been the end of it. But a few weeks later, Josh walked into the break room while I was pouring coffee and said, "You know Paula blames you for what happened, right?" I looked up. "Blames me?" He nodded. "Apparently, she told HR. You sabotaged the report." I stared at him. "But the report was correct." Josh shrugged. "I know." Then he took a sip of coffee. "Some people still think you set her up." That stayed with me longer than I wanted it to. That night, I sat in my apartment thinking about the report, the chart, the meeting, the silence in that executive room. Because technically, I had not sabotaged anything. The analysis was accurate. The model was sound. The report was legitimate. The only thing I had done, was make sure the report required the presenter to actually understand it. And sometimes I still wonder about that. If I had kept it simpler, if I had removed that extra layer, if I had made it easier for someone to fake their way through, would Paula still be managing that department today? Some people would say she got exactly what she deserved. Some would say I pushed too hard. Maybe both are true. I honestly don't know. But I do know this. After that meeting, Paula never presented anyone else's report again.